Hey everybody, welcome back to Investing with Wesley. You know, we've mentioned cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin in the past, but recently it just seems like it keeps on going up. And in today's episode, I'm going to tackle the topic of just how high Bitcoin can possibly go and what are the estimated values it could be worth at the end of the year or at the end of this halving cycle, and why some people think it's going to go all the way up to $400,000, all the way up to $1 million, and even higher. So with that being said, let's get into it. Now, you'll know if you've watched my previous episode on cryptocurrencies that I look at Bitcoin the exact same way I look at any other commodity. And Bitcoin, Ethereum, and two other coins are really the only cryptocurrencies I find worth investing in. But Bitcoin is unique in and upon itself because it's the first cryptocurrency out there, and there's some mystique to who created it because we have a name, but we have no idea who that person is. And not only that, but it has some of the most unprecedented growths and downfalls that we have ever seen in the market. Now, the real question is, how much higher can the cost of Bitcoin get? Or are we expecting it to tumble? Now, a lot of skeptics out there say that Bitcoin is worthless, it has no inherent value, and it is really just a fad investment that people are dumping their life savings into, all because it is worthless and eventually it'll go all the way back down to zero. Now, that's what the skeptics are saying, but what about the fanatics? Well, the fanatics think that Bitcoin is just going to keep on going up forever because of how deflationary it is. But not only that, they think it's going to go up so much that Bitcoin will become the world's new reserve currency because no one person or government can control it. It is exactly what it is. And in order for something like that to happen, the price of Bitcoin would have to go up way higher than what we've already seen it hit. And honestly, because no one can really predict the future and because these cryptocurrencies aren't tied to anything tangible like gold, both of these scenarios could very well be true in their own way. So the truth is, what can we really expect this year from Bitcoin, and what can we expect from Bitcoin in the future? Now, real quick, before I get into all the math and all the history and all the details, I want to give you a quick disclaimer, and that is, nowhere in this video am I saying that you should pour all your money into Bitcoin, buy Bitcoin, sell Bitcoin. None of this is investment advice. I'm only going to give you the facts and the historical returns in each period of Bitcoin's life. And based on that, we're going to try and predict where the future value of Bitcoin is going to go. But at the end of the day, no one knows where the price of Bitcoin is going to go. I certainly don't, and no one else online will know. This is all speculation and best guess based on all the facts and evidence we have. So if you take it upon yourself to invest in Bitcoin, whether you're already in there or just going to start out, remember the number one rule with any sort of investing: only invest the money that you're willing to lose in the event that Bitcoin or any of your other investments go to zero. I know plenty of people that took out loans, mortgaged their house, and dumped all their life savings into certain investments that they thought were going to go up, but that have completely crumbled. And although I gave them every opportunity and every warning I could that these investments were not good investments, they refused to listen to me, and now they are literally starting from scratch all over again. I do not want that happening to you, so make sure you follow the fundamentals of investing, do all of your research, and again, only invest the amount of money you're willing to lose. Now, from the start of Bitcoin up until its very first halving period, which was about 4 years after it started, it grew to $25 a coin. Now, when you compare it to its current price, that's really not that impressive. But for a brand new type of investment and a brand new type of currency that no one really knew anything about or really how it worked because it was so new, to be $25 per coin is actually pretty extreme. And the reason I bring this up is because all these graphs are going to take place based on the growth of its halving periods. So that was its first halving period. From the moment it came out to its first halving period, it reached a value of about $25 a coin. But from $25 a coin up until the next halving period, it grew to just over about $1,000 a coin. And then right before the third halving period, it grew to $20,000 a coin. Now, this consistent growth pattern after each of its halving periods is great news. But as we've already mentioned, Bitcoin has showed us some extreme highs as well as some extreme lows. So it's safe to say we can't expect it to keep going up forever. But I think what's really important for you guys to understand, and again, do your own research on this, but the graphs show that every time Bitcoin has a halving period, the next phase of growth will ultimately peak at about an average of 20 times the previous halving period's peak. Now, I get that 25 times 20 is not $1,000. But like I said, it's an average growth of about 20 times. In this particular halving period, it grew well over the 20 time limit. But in the next growing period, it stuck to about the 20 times average. So even though the second halving period's peak was at $1,000, during the third halving period's peak, it grew all the way to $20,000. So if we do the same exact math and take the last halving period's peak and multiply it times 20, that'll give us the rough estimate on what Bitcoin will be in this current halving period. Now, recently, only a couple months ago, we just started a new halving period when it comes to Bitcoin. Now, typically, these halving periods have occurred every 4 years. So we're trying to predict what the peak of Bitcoin will be in the next 4 years. And if the previous halving period's peak was $20,000, well then 20,000 times 20 is equivalent to about $400,000 per coin when it comes to the peak of this halving period over the course of the next 4 years. Now, do I think we're going to get there by the end of 2021? Absolutely not. But definitely by the end of 2025, I think it's at least possible that Bitcoin can go up that high. But then again, you got to remember, we're only talking about and measuring the peaks of each of these halving periods. After the peak, there's ultimately a dip and then another small peak and so on and so forth. So if we actually dig a little deeper, we can actually find a broader range or a better average that we could shoot for. Because I'm sure some of you think that $400,000 per Bitcoin is just astronomical. And we haven't even gotten that far ahead yet. So there's another method to measure the rise and fall of Bitcoin, and that is the double peak method. And this is basically the exact same thing I just explained to you, taking the previous halving period's peaks, but instead it takes the top 2 peaks, not just the top 1. And that actually gives a very broad range when it comes to Bitcoin's worth. From the moment Bitcoin came out to its first halving period, I told you that it peaked around $25, but its second peak was only at about $12. During the second halving period, it peaked at $1,000, but its second peak was $750. During the third peak, it reached all the way up to $20,000, but then its next highest peak was only $10,000. So again, trying to predict the future here, if we use this graph and these averages, then the price of Bitcoin during this halving period at some point can go up anywhere from $400,000 to $250,000, which honestly, when you think about it, is a huge difference. Sure, $400,000 sounds great, especially if you own a couple full coins. But think about if you get greedy or if you miss that opportunity, your next best peak is going to be about half of what it used to be. Now, before I give you my personal opinion whether I think Bitcoin will keep going up or if we'll see a massive correction in the coin's value itself, I want to talk about the fanatics and why they think it'll become the new reserve currency and exactly what it's going to take for it to become the new reserve currency. Now, the fanatics out there really want it to become the world's new reserve currency simply because every time a Bitcoin is moved from one account to another, it is logged in the blockchain, and anyone can search in the blockchain and figure out what wallet sent it to what wallet and where all these different Bitcoins have moved to. So the transparency aspect of it as a global reserve currency is something that people have been hoping for years. But what would it take for Bitcoin to actually become the world's new reserve currency? Well, if it were to become the world's reserve currency, each Satoshi in a Bitcoin would have to be equal at least $1. And if you don't already know this, there is 100 million Satoshis in each one Bitcoin. So that means the price of Bitcoin per coin would have to be $100 million or more just for it to have a Satoshi worth $1. And that gives it the market cap to be a reserve currency and to have it be valuable enough for the entire world to use. Now, currently Bitcoin is hovering at about $60,000 a coin. So to talk about Bitcoin going all the way up to $100 million per coin just seems ludicrous. But then again, it does have intrinsic value, and the value of it only goes up with time because it is deflationary in nature. Do I think it'll go up to $100 million? Yes, I honestly do, but I don't think it's going to be anytime soon. Even if you follow the same graphs and the same time scales that we talked about previous, where every halving period goes up 20 times and it's roughly every 4 years, it would take 2 more halving periods for it to reach that $100 million per coin. And I know that Bitcoin has showed us some very extreme gains in its history, but to think it would go from $60,000 per coin to over $100 million per coin in the next 15 to 20 years just seems really crazy to think that that could possibly happen. So with that being said, what do I think the price of Bitcoin is going to do? Well, personally, just based on my own research and my belief, I think the price of Bitcoin will go all the way up to about $150,000 by the end of this year. And ultimately, at the peak of this particular halving period, I think it will actually hit the $400,000 mark. And I'm not the only one that thinks so. There are some big names in finance and big names in investing that also think the price of Bitcoin is going to go up anywhere from $400,000 to $1 million a coin. But do I think the price of Bitcoin is going to go up to $100 million plus? No, personally, I don't. I don't think it'll be the new reserve currency either. And that's simply because there are too many people in power that love having the money and love having that power. So to give that power completely up, or to have that power forcibly removed by the government and turned over to this completely transparent digital asset, I just think the politics of it would never allow it. But then again, the government tried making it illegal for civilians to own and hold gold, but look how that turned out. So once again, I just want to reiterate that although I do believe the price of Bitcoin will go up to $150,000 per coin by the end of the year, and maybe even $400,000 by the end of this halving period, I'm not saying you should invest in it. Because this is a digital asset that's not tied to anything real and tangible, there is some inherent risk with it, like any other investment. So if it doesn't fit your risk tolerance or suitability for investments, even if you also think Bitcoin will go up, don't invest in it. Only invest the money that you're willing to lose, and only invest with the amount of risk that you're comfortable with. I hope you got value from this video. If you did, please remember to like and subscribe because it really helps the YouTube algorithm. I also have a dedicated Instagram account called Invest with Wesley, and I don't post there too often, but I'm on it scrolling pretty much every day. So if you ever had a question or just wanted to talk for a moment, feel free to reach on me there because it's a lot easier to have a conversation on Instagram than it is to siphon through all these comments. But until our next episode, have a good one.